Yo, what's that? Is that actual microphone quality? And is that 60 frames per second footage I'm seeing in the background? Yo, what happened, dude? Well, I got a new microphone, plain and simple, because I have nothing else better to do. And I also recorded this on the PC this time. Why didn't I record it on the PC the first time? Well, by the time they had released Halo Combat Evolved on the PC, I had already recorded all the footage and was midway editing the video. And this is a guy whose channel banner literally says, I don't have banner art, fuck you. So if you think that I'm going to actually go back and re-record things just so we can get a few extra frames, you're damn insane. But onto the topic at hand. Halo 2, the sequel to the immensely popular Halo Combat Evolved. It's one of the most well-known games in the series for a whole mess of reasons. Some great, some not so great. And hey, that's what we're here to talk about today. The good, the bad, and the please make it stop. Just like last time, I recorded this on the Master Chief Collection just like I said. I also played on normal difficulty to get this footage, but oh, don't you worry. We'll talk about the higher difficulties. Oh boy, will we. I'm not going to talk about the anniversary edition of the game for the most part. I'll touch on it now and again, but I'll just say right off the bat that the anniversary graphics and sounds are absolutely phenomenal and stay extremely true to the source material. Really just updating it to bring it into the modern age without really touching the gameplay whatsoever. But, just like last time, let's kick things off with the presentation. So yeah, the game is 16 years old, but honestly, it doesn't look all that bad. It's absolutely a huge step up from Halo 1, even if the faces look a little awkward. But all of the models, the textures, the lighting, it's all been bumped up. Especially the models. I mean, for God's sakes, just look at Cortana. The skyboxes are still unreal at times. Even if they are just flat, painted textures they plastered into the sky, they're still pretty visually impressive and add an even greater sense of scale to the game. Speaking of scale, the environments all look much better and more varied. Remember how in Halo 1 we only got a little bit of a taste of the ancient aliens who built the Halo ring with the control room, the library, and a few others? Well, now there are plenty more environments that properly show off the Forerunners' architecture and paint just a little bit more of a picture of what they were like, even if they are still pretty mysterious. The variety doesn't stop there. We see a whole slew of new environments: open, natural areas, a human city, a Covenant city. All of it just comes together really well. Yeah, these places are wildly different in style, but they all fit into the world and make the universe feel really well put together while still keeping the factions distinct from one another. The environments have pretty much been beefed up to 11, and there's plenty of areas that give you an absolutely massive sense of scale. It's honestly pretty damn impressive, especially considering the technological limitations they had at the time. The cutscenes also have improved quite a bit. While the camera work is still a little stilted and awkward, and the animations aren't all that fluid, they look vastly superior to Halo 1's, with a lot more happening than just characters running, punching, or pointing their guns at someone. It helps make the characters appear a lot more alive and not like awkward high school theater kids during the first performance. Now they look like awkward high school theater kids during their 5th performance. There are even little additions like giving unique models or textures to various Covenant factions to distinguish them from one another, but that's something we'll touch on more in the story segment. But just like in the first Halo game, even if the visuals look a tad dated, the sound is still spectacular. The voice acting is, as always, top notch. Steve Downes, Jen Taylor, David Scully, Tim Dadabo, they all return once again and give us a great performance, but we've got plenty of new ones too. Julie Benz does a pretty decent job at portraying Commander Miranda Keyes, the daughter of Captain Jacob Keyes from the previous game. There's actually not too much I have to say about her. She's not bad at all, but she's just sort of okay. Miranda is a really great character, but her voice acting doesn't really stand out all that much. Kevin Michael Richardson, now there's a man you want to have voicing a villain. He voices Tartarus, and my god, does he do a fantastic job at making him sound as sinister as he can. And he's got one hell of a commanding voice, really fitting someone who's the chieftain of an entire race of barbaric warmongerers. The Prophets of Regret, Mercy, and Truth are all wonderfully portrayed as well by Robin Atkin Downes, Hamilton Camp, and Michael Wincott respectively. All of them really do a fantastic job at encapsulating the Prophet's personalities, with Regret being the most arrogant and hard-headed, Mercy being the most fanatic and devoted, and Truth being, ironically, the most treacherous and deceptive. Playing Lord Hood is none other than Ron Perlman. Yeah, shockingly enough, I didn't even know this until I started writing the script, but hey, whatever, I'm an idiot. But he's great, really giving Lord Hood a voice that has some proper authority to it, but manages to remain calm in the face of adversity, emphasizing that he's been doing this for a long, long time. D. Bradley Baker lends his voice to bring the Gravemind to life, and holy shit. I know his voice has some effects laid over it to make it more unnatural, but my god, he just makes this thing sound so sinister. It's absolutely incredible. And it certainly helps that he's been given some insanely great lines. Ratas Vadum is voiced by Robert John Davey, and like the rest of the cast, he does a great job, showing that Ratas is not only a veteran and experienced commander, but a charismatic leader who's great at rallying his troops and keeping their morale up in tough situations. And last, but absolutely not least, we have...
Keith fucking David!
Yeah, it's Keith David. You know he's gonna be good, and yeah, he's great, making the Arbiter's voice almost as iconic, if not just as much as Master Chief's, and that's saying something. He's able to show the Arbiter to be a man, alien, dedicated to his honor, who's not willing to flinch from even the most horrific of moments. And just like in Halo 1, the weapons sound phenomenal and unique.
Security Station 4 is under attack.
I'm not sure what you want me to say about the sounds of the guns, or the vehicles for that matter. They're very distinct and easy to recognize by sound alone, save for the Brute and the regular plasma rifle, but, I mean, they're nearly identical weapons, so it's not that huge of a deal. Though admittedly, the assault rifle's substitute, the SMG, doesn't really sound as good as its predecessor. Similarly, NPCs, friendly and hostile, have unique lines of dialogue that make them feel more alive. The only difference is that the Covenant can now speak English rather than their own language from the previous game. I guess in the past few weeks, the Covenant learned our language just so they could yell at us better. I respect the hustle. But come on, I'm talking about sound. In a Halo game. Halo 2 of all games. You know I'm gonna talk about the music. Well, the intro music is back, and it... It's different. And that's not the only absolute banger in this game's soundtrack.
You might consider sitting this one out.
Yeah, that's Blow Me Away by Breaking Benjamin and Follow by Incubus. Remember, this was 2004 and garbage alt-rock was at its absolute height. It's wonderful. The songs honestly do add to the action. Even if it's a little dated, come on, you're telling me you don't want to obliterate an entire room of aliens or shoot some out of the sky while a rock band plays you on like some crack-addled bards from an out-of-hand D&D game? Yeah, that's what I thought. But the calmer, more atmospheric tracks are still here, and they're as good as ever. So don't worry, the less off-the-wall stuff is still there, and it's fantastic, perfectly portraying every situation you may have found yourself in. Okay, almost every situation. Whether you like the rock additions or you hate them, you can't deny they're integral to Halo 2's identity. It's honestly a bit of a shame that they were replaced in the anniversary version of the game. I get that it was a licensing thing, but it still sucks. That said, the replacement tracks for Follow and Blow Me Away are Follow in Flight and Breaking the Covenant, respectively. They're absolutely great pieces of music, and I do think they fit Halo 2. I mean, they're pretty much what would happen if the Doom 2016 soundtrack had a child with the Halo soundtrack. But, alright, I think we should go on to the actual gameplay of this legendary piece of gaming. So, how is it? So one of my biggest gripes with Halo 1 was the movement. It just felt a little awkward and clunky, and Halo 2 fixes that. You feel like you have a lot more control over your movement and can more easily change your direction. You can jump even higher than the previous game, and with the way that the maps are structured with a lot more complex terrain and cover, it feels like you can use this to your advantage a lot more. They've also changed the way the health system works. Rather than having shields and health, you only have shields. After that, you can take a few more hits before you die. And just like before, your shields will automatically recharge after going a few seconds without taking hits. I think it's a good change. It's more forgiving and allows players to experiment in combat more without worrying about their health being drained and having to stay on their toes until they find a health pack. With as many new weapon combinations, you honestly can't help but want to experiment and see what works best for you. Driving has also been massively improved. The Warthog feels great to drive around in, having some weight to prevent you from stopping on a dime, but not enough to make you feel like you're just driving a ton of bricks. The Ghost has also been improved, but it's still not the best, feeling a little bit slow to turn at times. But it's still a hell of a lot better than before. It also has a boost that allows you to sacrifice maneuverability for an extra bit of speed, which can come in handy in some situations. Banshees have a boost like this as well. They're also able to perform tricks to dodge enemy attacks, which can come in handy quite a bit. And these are all just new additions. Even on their own, Banshees still feel excellent to handle, as does the Scorpion. But we've got a few brand new additions to the vehicle roster as well. The Spectre is a new Covenant vehicle, also boasting a boost, meant to be sort of a combination of a Warthog and a Ghost. It allows two allies to sit on the sides while another can use the turret above. It's actually a pretty fun vehicle, and its ability to move side to side prevents it from being just a Warthog with a Covenant skin painted over it. The Wraiths, the floating artillery tanks the Covenant used in Halo 1, are back, and they can now be piloted by the player. Their attacks are more powerful than the Scorpion, but they're slower moving and a lot easier to dodge. They also get a bit of mobility with being able to strafe as well as being able to use a boost, similar to how the other Covenant vehicles do. The only new human vehicle is really just a variant of the Warthog, but it's one hell of a variant. Rather than shooting a chain gun, it fires Gauss rounds. What does that mean? Well, if you don't like something, you point the cannon at it, pull the trigger, and it stops existing. But sometimes, your enemies have these vehicles, and you want them. So what do? You channel your inner American and take these vehicles directly to get to their sweet, sweet oil. Hijacking is another new mechanic in the game, allowing you to board enemy vehicles and force the driver out so you can take it for yourself. If it's a bigger vehicle, like a tank, you'll need to board it and punch it until the cabin pops open, and then you can either beat the driver to death or drop a grenade into it. Then you can take it for yourself, or you can keep on wailing at it until it dies. It makes vehicles a bit less deadly as long as you can maneuver around them, giving you a viable way of getting them without first killing the driver or straight up destroying them. This really comes in handy in multiplayer when everybody and their mother wants you as a hood ornament. Now, onto the real bread and butter, the guns. We've got an absolute slew of new weapons to go through, so to avoid spending 10 minutes talking about guns alone, I'll try and go through them as quickly as possible. The Covenant get a whole bunch of new weapons, a new variant of the plasma rifle that shoots faster but, as a result, overheats faster, called the Brute Plasma Rifle. Original. The energy sword that you saw high-ranking elites use in the previous game can now be used, as long as you're careful not to launch yourself into the stratosphere with the lunge. Yeah, the range on this thing is kind of ridiculous, and you can have some pretty wild results, but it's fun. The Covenant also finally have a dedicated precision weapon with the Carbine, firing single shots so you can get some medium to long range hits in. They've also got their own sniper rifle with the beam rifle, and don't you worry. You'll get very familiar with this. The Brute Shot is another new addition, acting as a grenade launcher that is useful for cleaning out smaller groups of enemies. The Fuel Rod Cannon is like a rocket launcher that can hold more ammo and fire slower rounds that can be pretty good for hitting enemies behind cover. The little sentinel robots that you find in certain levels also drop their beam weapons, which come in orange and blue, with the blue being stronger. Though both are good for burning things that are criminally unburned. The humans also get a few new toys. The battle rifle is a 3-round burst precision weapon, which is honestly a bit of a go-to weapon in the game. The Magnum makes its return as well. Watch as I take care of these yeah, the Magnum has been nerfed to high heaven. It's still good for popping headshots, but it's not nearly as reliable as the previous game, and that's not the only human weapon that has been done dirty. The assault rifle is completely gone and replaced with the SMG. Sure, it can hold more rounds and fire faster, but the damage has been reduced and it doesn't really sound as powerful as the assault rifle. I mean, it's not a bad weapon, but it does lack the punch of... Hold on. What does that say? Alright, I can live without the assault rifle. Yeah, dual wielding is fantastic, and it adds a whole new level to the gameplay. You can hold a full amount of ammo for each gun you're carrying, so you don't need to worry about ammo being sacrificed. It gives you a few in-the-moment decisions. Do you want to just unload all of your ammo into a group of enemies, or do you want to alternate your fire using one weapon and then switching to the other when you need to reload? You'll also need to keep in mind that if you want to switch to your other carried weapon or to melee, you'll need to drop the dual-wielded weapon. It's a great feature, and it really helps make the game feel even more action-packed than it already is, because why wouldn't you want to hold two guns? It's badass. See Master Chief on the cover there? That ain't no fancy art, that's you! That's you doing that! You're that man! Grenades also return, and pretty much function the same way as they did in the previous game. Plasmas are sticky, frags are bouncy, both go boom. The AI has also seen an improvement, with it reacting even more intelligently. They'll try to flank you more often, they'll attempt to draw you out of cover for their snipers to hit you. It's really impressive, honestly. It's challenging, fair, and... Okay, we need to talk about Legendary difficulty. I beat this game on Legendary difficulty by myself a while ago, but I went back and got some footage for this. Halo 2's Legendary difficulty is actually legendary. It's hard enough to give Dark Souls a run for its money, and sometimes it can be good, but others not so much. I didn't talk about Legendary difficulty in Halo CE, but that's because I felt like it was a pretty good and fair challenge. It can be a bit much at times, but overall, it's something that punishes you for being stupid, but also doesn't curb stomp you for taking one step to the left at the wrong time. Halo 2, I can't say the same. It has moments where it's tough but fair, and honestly, that's most of the campaign. It's a very challenging yet rewarding experience, but there's one specific thing that makes it an absolute nightmare to slog through. Jackal snipers. These sons of bitches will kill you in one shot, and they miss maybe 1 out of every 100 shots. You need to basically make them play whack-a-mole with you in order to get past them, and even that doesn't work half the time. It's not fun going up against these guys, it's just tedious, frustrating, and enraging. They're easily the worst part of Legendary difficulty. Without them, it'd still be very challenging, but it would be a lot more rewarding and a hell of a lot less frustrating. I'd still recommend going through the game on Legendary at some point, but only after you consider yourself a veteran. Definitely memorize those sniper spawns. Alright, so let's move on to the campaign structure itself. The campaign is split up into 2 different sets of missions in which you alternate between missions where you play as the Master Chief and missions where you play as the Arbiter. They play identically, with the only real difference being the appearance of their UI and their toggled ability. The Arbiter can turn himself invisible for a short period of time. 10 seconds on easy and normal difficulty, and 5 seconds on heroic and legendary difficulty. This allows you to start fights on your terms, seeking out a tough enemy and taking them out before the others. It also allows you to make quick retreats in combat if things get too hairy and you need to switch between cover. Master Chief gets a flashlight. Yeah, one of these is more useful than the other. Regardless, they move and shoot the exact same and have the exact same health pool, so there's no real noticeable gameplay difference between the two of them. I'm not going to go as in-depth as I did last time, we've still got a lot to cover and this video is already long enough as it is. So I'll go through the major points. The game starts off like the previous one with tight corridors, plenty of enemies. It's getting you back into the action in a familiar way while also introducing you to a new enemy halfway through, drones. They're basically flying grunts, weak on their own but can be deadly in large numbers. The next level also has a good mixture of tight corridors and open areas with some driving segments. This has a lot more combat in it than Halo CE's first driving segment to try and get you a bit more into it. Then we go to the tank section in the next level. And it's basically a drive down a narrow bridge, blowing stuff up. Simple, but fun, even if it goes on for a while. Then it ends with another arena fight inside the Scarab that's been haunting you for most of the level. Kind of an underwhelming fight in terms of mechanics, especially considering the fact that the Scarab apparently posed such a massive threat to you, but thematically, it was pretty cool. Next, it's onto the Arbiter. His next 3 missions are almost all entirely within close quarters, with alien enemies and the Flood being introduced in the second of his trio of missions. He also gets a few flying segments to get you used to flying a Banshee, making it more useful than the one single time you used it in Halo CE. He's also got the first boss fight in the game, a cool intro to the battle, and it's over. Really? That's it, we did. Master Chief comes back with a few more open areas, another tank segment, and closes it off with some large indoor arenas. He then gets a second boss fight, and it's actually less of a challenge than the previous one. Alright, you're noticing a pattern here. The bosses were not meant for normal difficulty, they're total pushovers. The final boss is a bit harder, but that's only because he takes longer to kill. The bosses really shine on higher difficulties where you actually have to pay attention to their mechanics and you can't just one-shot them. It's a damn shame because these fights are actually pretty well designed, requiring you to think on the fly and make split-second decisions to overcome them. Anyway, game goes back to the Arbiter where you've got to fight off the Flood and some Sentinels. They're only used in these next 2 levels and they're pretty easy enemies to fight, only a challenge when they overwhelm you or take you by surprise, but they're pretty cool thematically. There's 3 variants. Orange Beam, Blue Beam, Big Boy. Orange and blue are the same, but blue hits harder. The big boy, you need to fight around his shields in order to take him down, and the first one you fight is actually presented like a mini boss fight. It's kinda cool, honestly, and teaches you their mechanics in a controlled environment. The next level has more of these arenas, but it starts off with some driving to show you the Spectre and how it works, and like I said, it's a pretty fun vehicle to use. Back to Master Chief, the level starts out by showing you a new type of enemy, Brutes. They're basically like elites in that they command squads of troops, but they don't have shields, and when they take too much damage, they go berserk and charge at you. Though if you have a precision weapon, it's pretty easy to pop off their helmet and get some headshots in. The rest of the level is pretty much a mixture of corridors and open arenas to battle in. It also starts off the fights between the elites, the brutes, and the aliens that have sided with them. A fun three-way war with both sides still wanting you dead. Going back to the Arbiter, you have to go on the ground and battle some more of the alien enemies while fighting alongside some elites, basically partaking in the civil war you saw in the previous level. It's also got a proper ghost driving segment that lets you see the true splatter power of it. Yeah, not much else to say. It's a pretty good time. Last Chief mission is when you get to fight the Flood and the Covenant at the same time, just like the ending of Halo CE, using similar arenas that you had to in the previous level with Chief. Again, not much else to say here. It's a pretty good level. The Arbiter has a few more arenas, as well as a segment where he drives a Wraith, flies a Banshee, and finishes the game off with a final boss. It's honestly kind of a final testament to your skills, and that's pretty much it. The campaign is greatly designed, having a good mixture of tight spaces and open arenas just like its predecessor, though it does make more use of its vehicle combat and refines it so that it's more enjoyable. But I do have to criticize the fact that there are some arenas in which you just stand around waiting for enemies to spawn. So sometimes you're just sitting in an area wondering where the hell you're supposed to go before realizing that you're not supposed to go. You're supposed to keep shooting. I get that it's supposed to give you some time to recover between fights instead of just swarming you with enemies, but it does break the flow of the game. Other than that, the campaign structure is pretty damn solid. I know I just kind of breezed through that rather than going in depth like I did in my previous video, but like I said, there's a lot left to cover in this video, and there's 15 missions in this campaign. I can't break them all down like that. Oh yeah, the story.
If they came to hear me beg, they will be disappointed.
Alright, again, spoilers abound. If you care about a 16-year-old game being spoiled, go here. 3, 2, fuck you, we're going. And we're doing the same dumb thing we did last time. You play as Mr. Chef again and have to kick some aliens off your space station for crashing your party with Ron Perlman by disarming a bomb with your big titty holographic GF and then slapping a return to sender sticker on it. You then kick the aliens off your home planet because they're not paying rent before you, Johnny, and Miranda Cosgrove chase after the running aliens. You then become the Arbalist and have to work with the aliens to kill another alien man because 3 floating wheelchair-bound boomers decided you suck at your job. Also a gorilla major chest hurt and he's kind of a dick. You and another dude hunt down the guy while killing some zombies before you kill him and find the light bulb from the last game, who then gets kidnapped by the gorilla. Mr. Chef and co. find out the aliens are going to another hula hoop and have to stop him from turning it on. Johnny and Megan go to find the key that you went through hell to get in the last game while you commit some casual genocide and then abuse the elderly. You then start to drown but are saved by the local hentai agent. Apparently, abusing the elderly has made the lizard aliens real sad because the living floating boomers made them give their hats to the local baboons because Mr. Chef beat up one of them. Time to be the armbinder again, and you go to find the key that Megan and Johnny were hunting, but you gotta fight your way through some whack-ass robots and zombies, so you shoot-bang your way through while the gorilla floats around in a ship telling you and your other alien buddy that you suck before said alien buddy runs off to make sure the zombies don't catch up with you. He's probably dead. But you kill some zombies before you fight Johnny and Megan, and then the gorilla kidnaps them both and zaps you into a hole because Jesus told him to do it. When you go into the hole, you find out the local hentai agent has taken both Mr. Chef and Arbor Day into the same place because both have been seen as prime candidates, but first you gotta make sure Gorilla Man doesn't zap the universe. So Mr. Chef goes to the alien city, sticks his GF into the city, and commits some hate crimes while she watches and helps him. I'm pretty sure it's hate crimes. It's probably hate crimes. But he kills some alien folk, frees some crayon eaters, and then goes on his way, finding out that one of the boomers has been left to get ate by zombies, while the last one sends the gorilla, Johnny, and Megan to the hula hoop while he gets on a cool alien spaceship. Archbishop time again. He starts 1776ing up the place by gathering some lizard folks and killing baboons before he meets up with his alien buddy, who's not dead. Mr. Chef returns this time and commits some more hate crimes while also acting as an exterminator. The duality of Chef. Your GF tells you that the last living boomer is on the alien ship and you gotta get to it to stop him. So you Buzz Lightyear your way to the alien ship before it's time to be the armchair again and meet up with Johnny. Johnny takes a walking tank and zaps his way through a big door while you zip and zoom your way around him and meet up with the gorilla who tries to make Megan turn on the ring. She says no because she's a strong independent woman, and then you and Johnny show up. The light bulb tells the gorilla that the hula hoop is deadly, but he's like,
Bro, whatever.
And turns it on with Megan before you body him, and Megan turns off the ring. The light bulb tells you that there's more hula hoops and that it's time to be Mr. Chef again. He's aboard the alien triangle ready to kick some ass. Alright, real story time now. Halo 2 takes place about a month after the events of Halo CE and starts off with honestly a really cool sequence. The very first cutscene is of Thel 'Vadam, the supreme commander of the forces guarding Halo in the first game, on trial in front of the three hierarchs of the Covenant, the Prophets of Regret, Truth, and Mercy, for failing to protect the ring from Master Chief. At the same time, our favorite Spartan is suiting up with a new set of gear on the defense station Cairo, getting ready to be honored for his service in destroying Halo, receiving a medal from Lord Terrence Hood, the highest-ranking naval officer in the UNSC. He's not the only one being honored, though. Sergeant Johnson is receiving an award, and so is Commander Miranda Keyes, daughter of Captain Jacob Keyes from the last game. Cortana is also attending the ceremony, mainly while maintaining the station's systems, but she's happy enough to be there for Chief's big moment. While the ceremony is going on, though, the scene cuts to moments from Thel 'Vadam's trial. He is stripped of his armor and tortured in front of the holy city of the Covenant, High Charity, with his shame broadcast throughout the entire city and, assumedly, throughout the entire Covenant Empire. It only concludes when he's branded with the mark of shame for his failure. It then cuts back to humanity, with Master Chief taking up arms and rallying the station's troops to fight against the invading Covenant force, while Cortana remains in the station's systems to maintain the automatic defense systems and fire the heavy guns. Through comms, you find out the Covenant have abandoned one of their attacks on the stations, only to find out that it wasn't because they're retreating, but because they planted a bomb, one that decimated the entire station. Knowing that there's one aboard, Cortana guides you through the station towards the control center, where you put her in your helmet and deactivate the bomb with only seconds to spare. Then Chief performs one of the most iconic things ever in gaming. Right before he meets up with Keyes and Johnson. You then go down to Earth to fight the Covenant forces that manage to get through the blockade. Cortana intercepts Covenant comms to learn that their forces are being led by the Prophet of Regret. So you plan to go after him, but are stopped by a massive Covenant tank known as a Scarab. It blasts your Pelican down and you crash land in the city with some Marines. You make your way through the war zone to rally the troops to defend humanity's home from this rampaging alien force before you start driving around and damaging some of their supply lines. As you do, Cortana intercepts Covenant comms and learns that Regret and his troops actually didn't know that Earth was humanity's homeworld, strangely enough. You then meet up with a squad of Marines as Johnson comes in to supply you with a Scorpion tank. You go across the bridge, killing a few more Covies along the way before meeting up with the squad trapped in a complex. The Scarab comes after you, but you and the Marines manage to survive, so you gear up and get aboard the Scarab tank to destroy it from the inside. You quickly need to pack up, though, as Regret and his forces begin retreating from Earth. You, Cortana, Keyes, and Johnson all get aboard the Amberclad and follow him through the slipspace portal that he opens up in the city, which, when it closes, destroys the entire surrounding area in a devastating explosion. Then we switch back to our secondary protagonist, Thel 'Vadam, who's being dragged by some brutes and their chieftain, Tartarus, to meet with the Prophets of Truth and Mercy. They bring him to the Mausoleum of the Arbiter, a title originally meant to be one of great honor to the elites before it eventually became a mark of shame. However, such a mark is still seen by the Covenant as one of great importance as, according to the Prophets, the Covenant would have failed long ago if it weren't for the Arbiters of the past. Thel is given the title of Arbiter in order to have the power to lead troops and fight in battle, with the Prophets intending on sending him on suicidal missions so that he may die a martyr for the Covenant and regain his honor. His first mission is to hunt down a heretic who claims that the Great Journey is a lie. He goes with Ratas Vadum, not to be confused with Thel 'Vadam. Different people. Vadam? Vadum? Get it? Got it? Fuck you. Anyway, Ratas, also known as Halfjaw, and the Arbiter commence a joint operation to hunt down the heretic Cesar Rafum and fight through his separatists hidden on a mining station in the planet's atmosphere. However, midway through the operation, it's revealed that the Flood is on the station where Cesar is hiding. You manage to track him down, only for him to hide in a completely sealed off part of the facility. Ratas takes his troops back to the Phantom, while the Arbiter goes to cut the cables holding the station, forcing it to fall down and drive the heretic out of hiding. When you confront him, he reveals where he learned about the truth of the Great Journey, none other than 343 Guilty Spark, who somehow survived Halo's destruction. As the heretic tells Guilty Spark, or as they call him, the Oracle, to explain things to the Arbiter, he just starts shooting him. You're aware that you could have so you kill him, and right before Guilty Spark can further explain how wrong you are, Tartarus captures him with his admittedly rad as fuck gravity hammer and brings you out of the system. Back to Chief and Co. You, Keyes, and Johnson all arrive where Regret jumped to. And where did he end up taking you? None other than another Halo ring.
Say what?
So naturally, you gotta stop them from firing it, so you go down onto the ring with some orbital drop shock troopers to assassinate Regret. As you go further in, Cortana manages to translate Regret's broadcast to his troops, revealing that he plans to activate Halo, so you need to rush to stop him. While you try to kill Regret, Keyes and Johnson go down to hunt the index of the ring, knowing that he can't fire the Halo ring without it. You fight your way through Covenant forces, and just as you're about to fight Regret, the largest Covenant fleet in recorded history just casually shows up, along with High Charity itself. Clearly, they're all preparing to see their sacred ring fire, but not today. You break into Regret's chambers and kill him, only to have the Covenant fleet begin firing at you. With nowhere to go, Chief jumps into the water and begins sinking, right before he's quickly pulled down into the depths by a mysterious tendril, as a disembodied voice tells him that this is not his grave. Then we return to the Arbiter, who's on his way to see the last two living prophets and witnesses the elite honor guard being replaced by brutes. Ratas is attempting to talk them out of it, but after Regret's assassination, they simply don't trust the elites to protect them anymore. The prophets then reveal that they don't actually know how to activate Halo, and they needed to ask the Oracle how to do it. He then revealed the index to them, which they refer to as the Sacred Icon. The Arbiter then descends onto the ring to try and find the index, with Tartarus providing air support. He's aware that Master Chief, or as the Covenant call him, the Demon, is on Halo. While he's focused on trying to get the index, he absolutely wants to get some revenge on Chief. So he goes into the ring, fighting off Sentinels before eventually encountering the Flood and needing to battle his way through them as well. He eventually meets up with Ratas and his forces before staging a full-blown assault on the Flood, battling their way through the ring in an attempt to get to the library. When they reach a transport to take it to them, Ratas stays behind to fend off the Flood while you go to the library with a team of elites. Unfortunately, the Flood overwhelms you and you're the sole survivor, so you make your way into the room where the index is held and find Johnson and Keyes have already taken hold of it. So the Arbiter, being the sneaky lad that he is, takes out some of their squad before attacking them directly. Just as he's about to subdue them, Tartarus comes in to have them both captured, as well as taking the index. The Arbiter is angry that Tartarus is hogging all the glory, only to then realize that he's not just there to steal the glory, but to kill him. It's then that Tartarus reveals that the prophets ordered him to be killed, as well as his entire species. He then blasts the Arbiter into a pit, assumedly to his death. Then we cut to Chief, who's no longer underwater, but instead is in a massive chamber. The same tendril that grabbed him is holding him up to a massive, absolutely fucking horrifying creature that will either haunt your nightmares or fuel your fetishes, depending on who you are. This is the Gravemind. It's a part of the Flood, and it's the thing that's controlling them. Yeah, the Flood isn't just a rabid parasite, it's a hive mind, and this is the center of it. It then brings the Arbiter down, also tangled in its tentacles, and holds the two of them side by side, expressing that Master Chief knows the truth about Halo, but that the Arbiter is still deluded. So he brings forth the monitor of the ring that you're on, 2401 Penitent Tangent, and the assimilated body of the Prophet of Regret. The two of them bicker, and the Gravemind explains to the Arbiter that the firing of the Halo rings that Penitent Tangent is talking about is the same thing as the Great Journey, that it's all a lie and will wipe out all life in the universe. He doesn't believe it at first, but realizes that he doesn't have much of a choice with his people now at war with the Covenant. Chief and the Arbiter are both sent away to different places in an attempt to find the index and prevent the ring from being fired. The Gravemind may not like either of them, but it knows that they have the best chance at stopping the ring from firing. Chief is sent to High Charity, the holy city of the Covenant, interrupting the Prophet of Truth's speech as he holds the index. He then battles his way through High Charity, with Cortana remaining in the city system to keep an eye on Truth and the defenses. As you go on, you realize that the Covenant is fighting itself, with elites and brutes at each other's throats and other species picking sides between the two of them. The grunts have even painted themselves another color to distinguish themselves as being on the side of the elites. By the time you find the prophets, it's too late. Truth has escaped, with Tartarus taking Johnson and Keyes to the control room to fire the rings. Before they left, however, they were attacked by the Flood, and Truth left Mercy to die at the hands or tendrils of the Flood, which had landed in the city through the now assimilated in Amberclad. Things shift over to the Arbiter again, who's been transported closer to the control room. He fights through some brutes before meeting up with some elites who are mounting an assault against the Covenant for betraying them. Similarly to High Charity, the grunts are fighting on your side as well as the brutes, further showing that the betrayal against the elites didn't just split one species off from the Covenant, it completely fractured its unity and threw it into a full-blown civil war. As you fight on, you eventually meet up with Ratas, who has gathered a great many more forces and is mustering them outside the control room. Things switch back over to Master Chief, who's still on High Charity as it's being attacked by the Flood. He finds Mercy on the ground, being attacked by an infection form, as he reveals that Truth is going to Earth. Even though he still appears dedicated to the Great Journey, he likely tells you because he wants Truth to suffer for betraying him. Or just to gloat that humanity will be wiped out. It's not really clear. Cortana reveals that the massive structure in the middle of the city is actually a Forerunner ship. While Chief expresses concern for going after Tartarus to stop Halo from firing, Cortana has a plan: to detonate the In Amberclad's reactor and destroy the city and Halo just like you did in the last game. She says that she doesn't want to take a chance at a remote activation and that she needs to stay on the city as a contingency, meaning Chief will need to leave without her. You fight through the infested city and make your way to the Forerunner ship, which, as Cortana puts it, has been constantly running and is being used to power High Charity. They're not really launching it per se, just not holding onto it anymore. You go through a gravity well to land on the Forerunner ship. As it takes off, Chief promises Cortana that he'll return to her when things are over, and that's when she says her ever-iconic line.
Don't make a girl to promise.
If you know you can't keep it.
And then the ship leaves through a slipspace portal and heads towards Earth. Then there's a shift back to the Arbiter, who's assaulting the control room with Ratas and an army of elites, grunts, hunters, anyone who's on their side. As you fight your way through, even managing to free some prisoners, you eventually meet Johnson, who's taking control of a scarab. He says that while you two hate each other, if you don't work together, Mr. Mohawk will fire the ring and kill everybody. So you provide him some cover from a Banshee as he blasts the doors to the control room open, allowing you, him, and a squad of elites to invade. You confront Tartarus, who's still trying to force Keys to use the Index and activate Halo. Even though Tartarus betrayed the elites, the Arbiter doesn't try to kill him at first, instead trying to have Guilty Spark explain the truth behind Halo to show him that he, too, was deceived by the Prophet's lies. Tartarus, blinded by his own faith, doesn't believe it. He forces Keys to activate Halo before fighting you. After he's defeated, Keys removes the Index, stopping Halo from firing with only a few seconds to spare. Guilty Spark then reveals that Truth plans to activate the rest of the Halo rings and that, in order to do that, he'll need to go to the Ark. The Arbiter then walks up between Keys and Johnson to ask where it is, indicating a more permanent alliance with humanity will benefit all of them in the long run. Back on Earth, a battle is still going on against the Covenant forces in space, where the Forerunner ship appears. Lord Hood is about to open fire on the ship before Master Chief requests that he hold off. Chief then says he's going to finish the fight, but he doesn't, because the game's over now. Yeah, that's kind of it. Well, there is an extra scene with the legendary ending. It's of Cortana on high charity now that the Gravemind has taken over, implying that he's going to interrogate her, likely about the humans and how to better defeat them. Then the game ends. For real this time. Okay, that was a long one. So, aside from that really bad cliffhanger ending, why is this story good? It's a hell of a lot more involved than Halo 1's story, honestly. Hell, the opening scenes are honestly just so much better, and I say this independent of my BDSM alien fetish. It's showing such a massive difference between the Covenant and humanity for the exact same thing happening. Chief is being praised and rewarded, while Fel is being punished and sentenced to death. The story also takes advantage of there being two main characters for you to play as, giving you a much broader scope than the last game. In Halo 1, you only saw things from the perspective of humanity. Here, you get to look at things from humanity and the Covenant. You can, of course, still see how humanity suffers and needs to struggle through the horrible things the Covenant does. However, you can also see through the story that the Covenant doesn't even have things all that great either, and that, while they may be a bit savage, they're not just pure evil, they're being deceived. Their religious zeal was only lightly talked about in Halo 1, but now you can see it on full display, where dissenters are marked for death and failures are punished severely. There's also just some really nice bits of world building, like seeing the different terminology the Covenant uses. Sacred Icon, Oracle, Sacred Ring, just neat little touches like that. If you played the entire game just as Master Chief, you wouldn't really get to see this kind of perspective in world building, not to the same degree at least. If you only played as Master Chief, you wouldn't understand why the elites suddenly started fighting the Covenant. You wouldn't know how Keyes and Johnson managed to escape Tartarus. You wouldn't know to what degree the prophets are lying to the Covenant. A lot of people criticize the story at launch because you didn't play as Master Chief all the way through and you played as this random alien. And while I understand that people were a bit mad about having to play as some random character, I think we can really appreciate now that the dual narrative between these two characters adds a lot more to the game's story, making it a lot more compelling than just shoot the bad men. It adds a bunch more context to the game. As for the ending, alright, yeah, that's still just bad, but apparently that's partially due to the absolute hell that it was to develop Halo 2. I'm not gonna go into a lot of detail here because this video is long enough as is. Jesus Christ, I've gotta learn to shorten these scripts. But Reykjavik made a video that talks about this game as well as the development hell behind it. You should watch that video. No, really, go watch it. It's better than this fucking garbage. Anyway, the story is honestly great aside from the ending, filled with great scenes that go from pure badassery like Chief's dropping up the Covenant bomb to more story-heavy ones like the Arbiter's betrayal. It also has not one, but two enemy of my enemy scenes, with the Gravemind helping the Chief and the Arbiter, and Arbiter teaming up with Johnson to defeat their foes. It really shows that in times this dire, the strangest alliances will form. There's also the sweet, sweet irony from the fact that the prophets essentially brought about their own downfall. If they hadn't caused the Great Schism, the elites would have had no reason to help Johnson rescue Keyes and stop Tartarus from firing the ring. But because the prophets became overconfident and wanted to punish the entirety of the elites, they made one of their greatest allies their most dangerous foe. Because not only did the elites know how the Covenant worked, but they have information that they could relay to the humans to give them a significant advantage. Nice going, floaty boys. You fucked up. And of course, it's probably the best game in the series for unforgettable lines.
If they came to hear me beg, they will be disappointed.
Sir, permission to leave the station.
For what purpose, Master Chief?
To give the Covenant back their bomb.
Permission granted.
Soon the great journey shall begin. But when it does, the weight of your heresy will stay your feet, and you shall be left behind.
I am a monument to all your sins.
Please, don't shake the light bulb.
And just like the last game, there's amazing characters. Chief and Cortana are, well, they're Chief and Cortana. There's not really much else to say about them. They're the same great duo as the first game. Johnson is back and a hell of a lot more involved than before, going from just a slight side character to being more seriously involved in the story, and he's just as colorful as ever. Not much else to say. More Johnson is good. Guilty Spark is the last returning character, and he's just as devoted to Halo as ever. He seems completely confused as to why the Covenant don't understand that Halo is dangerous and instead see it as an object of worship. Nevertheless, he's still a pretty fun light bulb to add to the cast. Miranda is another really great character. Very much like her father in that she's disciplined but also willing to make extremely dangerous decisions. If she feels like it's best for the mission, even if it puts her own life at risk, she'll go for it. She's also a parkour master. Honestly, I think she's a better character than Keyes from the previous game, if not just because she's more involved. The Prophets of Regret, Truth, and Mercy all have their own personalities. Regret is more rash and headstrong, Truth is more deceptive and calculated, and Mercy is more zealous and faithful. They're all raging lunatics, but they're different flavors of lunatic. Keeps things fresh. Tartarus is a damn good villain. He's ruthless, taunts you throughout the entire game, and has a great voice. I mean, come on, what more do you want from a sci-fi villain? He's also the polar opposite to the Arbiter. Deceptive, honorless, and completely blinded by his faith, making him an even better antagonist. Speaking of the Arbiter, he's someone who's guided mostly by his honor, just like most elites are. And while he was always faithful to the Great Journey, when he learned the truth, he didn't outright deny it. He saw the writing on the walls, even if it took some pushing, and thought it through logically, realizing that it was a lie and that he needs to change his ways. Honestly, he's a fantastic character, and his arc throughout the game is amazing. Ratas's character is a great parallel to the Arbiter. He's a great commander, and while he's dedicated to the journey, he immediately took it upon himself to rally troops against the Prophets when they betrayed his people and he learned the truth. He also shows a great amount of care for his soldiers, not just the elites, but even down to the grunts, which is extremely uncommon for elites. Lord Hood is honestly the Keyes of this game, despite there already being a Keyes. But I mean that in the sense that there's not much to him in this game, but he's a good supporting character who respects bold, daring moves, but doesn't want to allow for completely reckless stunts. Of course, there's also the Gravemind. Despite it being a horrific monstrosity, it has a very eloquent, almost poetic way of speaking, likely from its pure age. Not only is it just great on its own, it helps show how dangerous the Flood is now that you know they're not just a bunch of mindless husks, but a well-organized swarm. You thought they were bad before? Well, fuck you. And that's not even getting into the implications about humanity and the Forerunners being connected. Yeah, I mentioned it in the last video briefly, but the thought plickens here. You may have noticed that I said Tartarus was trying to force Miranda to activate the Halo Ring. Why didn't he just do it himself? Because he couldn't do it himself. He needed a human to activate it. It heavily implies some intrinsic link between humanity and the Forerunners. It's all just hinted out here and never directly stated, but it's a really cool detail to add to the game, just adding more stuff for people to think about when it comes to these mysterious ancient aliens. Why the Forerunners link themselves with humanity, or how deep this link goes, none of it's really talked about here. That's for future games. I know I basically just gushed about Halo 2's story for a little while there, but I mean, at one point I literally wrote an essay about it during university, so come on. Now I get to talk about it in an overly edited video that very few people will actually give a shit about, and I won't even get a grade for it. I'm doing this for fun. Am I okay? Oh yeah, this game also has multiplayer. I should talk about that. So multiplayer is once again something I was not familiar with at launch, but hey, Master Chief Collection is here to give it to me, so how is it? Well, the maps are great, that's the big thing. Hell, most of these are extremely iconic and have designs that have stuck through the Halo games for years afterwards, and for good reason. They're extremely well designed, just like in the first game. However, this time, things are even better. Thanks to graphical updates, it's a lot easier to make noticeable landmarks for players to remember and navigate around. The varied designs are also back, with a mixture of open areas, narrow hallways, overlooking areas, you name it. The only maps where long-range weapons are basically the meta are the bigger maps that have vehicles on them. And even then, there are still some that have tightly packed areas for more up-close and personal players to feel at home in. The vehicles on these maps also make it much more of a hell of a time, especially with the wider variety that we have. The game can sound like a proper war zone in certain areas, with constant explosions, engines roaring, the gunshots going off. It can get pretty damn chaotic. While it still can take you a good while to get from one side to the other while walking, you're a lot more likely to run into enemy players, which is a huge improvement from the walking simulator feeling of some of the previous maps. Some maps even have teleporters that will take you a good ways across the map. Yeah, Halo CE had these as well, but they feel just a bit more impactful here. One of my biggest problems with the previous game was how easy it was to get spawn killed, and while it does still happen, the spawn system is a lot better. It tends to put you a decent bit away from the action and in more covered areas. It's not perfect, but hey, it's one hell of an improvement. The weapon sandbox being expanded with new weapons and dual wielding can make for some pretty damn interesting shootouts, with players dropping their weapons to melee or throw grenades or picking up new ones. It's pretty damn fun. Players do tend to gravitate towards one weapon in particular though, the energy sword. And I can see why. This thing is a one-hit kill, and since you have such an insane range with the lunge, if you can make your way through cover to get to people, you can cut down a ridiculous amount of them with this thing. And it doesn't even have ammo like it does in the campaign, so you can theoretically use it the entire game without needing to worry, making it just a tad OP. Of course, there's still the matter of getting close enough to use it, so the wide variety of marksman positions on maps does make it so it's not completely overbearing. Another minor addition is that you can play as an elite in multiplayer, as well as a Spartan. Just like in campaign, it doesn't do anything other than change your in-game model and change your HUD. You can still move and shoot the same way, and even the hitboxes are the same as far as I can tell. There's no discernible difference between the two of them. I know this game's multiplayer is well known and what it's remembered for a lot of the time, but honestly, I don't have a whole lot to say about it other than, yeah, it's really good. I know, professional reviewer right here. It's a hell of a fun time, and it's easy to see why this multiplayer is so memorable. I got carried away trying to get footage, and I just kept playing it for a good while. It's just so engrossing. It's hard to put it into technical terms, it just feels good. The equal starts, the movement, the weapon sandbox, the map design, it all comes together just beautifully. And that's honestly my final thoughts about Halo 2 in general. Halo 2 is a legendary game, and for good reason. The campaign is well made, the story, besides the ending, is fantastic, the multiplayer is well balanced with spectacular maps, and the legendary campaign will give any masochist a hard-on that will last way more than 4 hours. And that's really the end. I was gonna pull the same joke I did last time, but then I bought a game off the Steam summer sale, and honestly, I kinda wanna make a video about that. The Halo 3 review will come. I know it was just released on PC a few days ago, but it's gonna be after that video. I wanna branch off a little bit more. I'll see ya, punks.